Welcome to Broadband Action. This is a podcast presented by the Community Broadband Action Network. I'm Curtis Dean, one of our co-founders of C-Band. John Willow is my co-host. She is another C-Band co-founder. And we are really excited for what has become an annual tradition around the C-Band Broadband Action podcast, and that is Doug Dawson's 2024 predictions. I need some fancy music and fireworks there. Yeah, well, maybe I can figure out a way to do that in post. But Doug is with CCG Consulting. He is, I would call you a guru, Doug, but that really kind of is demeaning to you because you're a hyper guru of broadband in America, and someone that I've turned to a lot for advice, a real mentor for me personally in my journey through telecommunications. And Doug, every year you do this the 2024 in this case predictions, and so we like to get you on here and talk about them. So thanks for joining us.
You bet. So it's always good to be here. This is always an interesting discussion. So
now this is on you publish this on your blog, Pots and Pans by ccg.com, and this is a blog that this is not just a one-time thing. You blog almost every day, if not every day.
Every day. Every day. Yes. Well, I don't blog on major holidays. Other than that,
well, that's okay. You need a day off to think of things, right? And you've been doing this the Pots and Pans blog for how long?
There's 3,700 of them, so divide that by a year. 12 years or 13 years.
Yeah. Wow. I haven't done that many of any one thing in my entire life. So hats off to you. Kudos. As a frustrated blog writer myself, I appreciate that you're able to produce content so consistently and excellent quality content. So, and I'm not just saying that because you're here in the room virtually. It's because it's true. All right. So we're going to start.
I'm excited to get to our first question. I'm glad that we're leading off with the one, honestly, that's most on my mind. So
yeah. What could you start out a 2024 prediction list without talking about predictions for BEAD in 2024? Doug, we await your wisdom.
Well, for the last year, everyone's been saying the money's just going to go to large guys, right? However, now that we're getting each state putting out their rules, we're getting 50 drastically different set of rules. And that completely upsets the equation. I mean, the rules, some states really look like the rules are going to favor wireless guys, so it's not going to go to the giant guys. Some guys are favoring only fiber, but there's also the nuances of the rules. I mean, it's no longer possible to predict. You can predict by state now once you look at what they've proposed, but really, I was hoping the states would sort of take the rough edges off the NTIA rules. They've gone completely the other direction and added a whole bunch of more rules on top of them. So it's going to be, you can't talk about BEAD generally anymore. It's now state specific. So there are no more what's BEAD going to do conversations. It's completely off the table.
It's BEADs.
Yes, it's
50 BEAD programs.
Yeah.
So how does
someone who my very first apartment had hippie beads, this is what it feels like.
The bead is
colored beads, right?
Yes,
well, really good analogy, because that beaded curtain, tried to partially hide what was on the other side, and we're all trying to figure out what's on the other side, state by state.
We no longer know. This is absolutely a mess, and so it's going to be very interesting. Yeah.
How does a provider with a multi-state footprint or desire to be in multi-states manage to pilot through all this? It's just
I'm guessing the really large guys like a charter are going to say, let's pick the 10 states that have the rules most favored to us and just completely ignore the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to pick your battles at this point, because that also means 50 different set of grant forms.
Right.
I mean, for the large company, this is a nightmare. So the large companies are going to have a lot harder time at this than we thought they would.
And we always thought that the small companies would have a hard time, but with it being a state by state program now, perhaps some of the states who have more favorable rules for the smaller providers, maybe we might see the little guys getting their honest shot at things.
At least in some states, I think they will. And before I didn't think they would. Now I think they will. But I'm not going to begin to predict which states will yet. So.
And reading through those some of those state plans that have come out too, we're also seeing that despite the alleged set aside for digital equity, it doesn't look like there's actually going to be any digital equity money. So, or at least in many states. So
Most
that
states have said they're only going to get to that if there's money left over.
Right.
correct,
Yep,
And
right.
some of
They'll
them,
get to it,
some of them came right out and said, "There's no way we're going to have any money left for that." They were honest about it.
right. So like in Michigan, for example, where I live, and where you live, right? Live in Michigan.
I live in
too?
North Carolina. So.
Oh
Yeah, he's
goodness!
in
I
warmer
don't know why I
climate.
thought you were so. I didn't know why
He's
I thought you
smarter.
were. We can edit this part out. Anyway, here in Michigan, where I am, there is no money for it either. So what they're putting into the plan is a framework, a suggested framework of planning, and then Eric Frederick, who's the he runs the high-speed internet office in Michigan. He's hoping to be able to find more funding later to plug into some specific programs, but that's honestly the most I've seen from some of the plans that I've read. Like, that's the most specific.
Yeah.
I don't think Iowa has anything.
The Iowa plan basically says we don't anticipate any of these funds being used for digital equity at this time. That's
and most of them that I've read have said that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our next prediction from Doug. RDOF troubles. Well, Doug, this seems like one you could throw up here almost any year since RDOF was attached, but or was launched. But what are the troubles going into 24?
Well, I work all across the country, and in a whole lot of counties, there has been nothing done with RDOF. The county guys have never heard from the RDOF winner.
Yeah.
There's no construction going on. And 2024 is the year they're supposed to have a pretty significant percentage of their networks done. And so if they don't, I think you're going to start. My prediction is we're going to see some fairly large players just walk away from RDOF. And you can't really blame them because, they wanted literally right after they won the money, we got into the inflation due to the pandemic. And all of a sudden networks cost 30 or 40% more than they did them. And I think they're looking and going, I can't do what I promised. But there's just this void out there where nobody knows where they are. I mean, they can't find them, talk to them. That's not a good sign that they're going to actually build. Now, that's not all of them. There's a lot of guys building RDOF networks and who are doing what they said they were going to do. But I think we're going to see some defaults. Unfortunately, it'll probably happen after BEAD, and then what happens to those folks?
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually what I was wondering, Doug, is if they have to claw some of those back, will that money be reallocated in the future, or does it just, do you predict it'll just?
Well, it's a different place. It's FCC money. It's not grant money. It's a 10-year subsidy.
Right.
Will they call it back? The FCC should claw it back. They've never done that before. That's what they should do. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I've gotten to know a government relations person for one of the larger RDOF winners, and I'm always telling this person, you need to be talking at the local level in those areas where you're planning. You need to be talking to them. They don't know what's happening. They haven't heard from you. Oh, well, we've got a plan. We're laying our network out. Well, then you need to talk to somebody about it. But
it's not that hard to pick up the phone.
Yeah. I think it's just there's so much uncertainty about the timeline for some of these. They know they've got to get it started. They may not really have a full grasp on where they're going to start and where they're going to end, or if they're even going to do it. Especially after that, since it was a reverse
auction. They've got their 40% build commitment by next year. If they don't, they're not starting in January. They're not going to make it.
So do you see a scenario where, given the circumstances of the pandemic and inflation, if there's an acknowledgement that this program just isn't working according to plan, like, might they restructure some of the requirements, or is that?
They very firmly said in September, the FCC said, hell no, we're not restructuring it. Because if they restructure for one company, they got to give them all more money. And so they very bluntly said, no, we're not giving you any more. Doesn't mean they won't change their mind, but that was a pretty strong no.
I just meant changing requirements, not giving more money. But no, none of that.
They all want more money.
So, Doug, have we learned one thing from this whole process, that reverse auctions don't work?
It works for some things. It's not a bad way to say
not for this.
But it sure doesn't work for this. This was a complete disaster from beginning to end. There's nothing good to say about that program other than it did build networks. But even those networks have these weird Swiss cheese holes in them. It's like, this is very odd. So,
All right, on to the next. Wireless technology improvements shake up the market. What are we shaking here?
We're already starting to see some. I saw speed tests in Ookla from a WISP that was delivering 500 megabits. They're talking about speeds up to a gigabit. They've got to put in the new radios. They've got to implement the 6 megahertz spectrum. And that spectrum just got finally blessed for some purposes, like in
Yeah.
October. We're going to start seeing some really fast radios, and maybe that's what some of the RDOF winners are holding off waiting for. But, so now still doesn't work great in urban areas. You still got the I can't get to your house because your neighbor's house is in the way sort of thing. But out in the rural areas, this is going to massively change the market, I think. So it's going to be market by market. Again, it doesn't work in Appalachia where I live. But
Right.
sure will. It's sure going to kick some butt in the Midwest. So,
Yeah. Except in those little isolated areas where we got the rolling hills and the little valleys. And you think maybe some of these RDOF winners are maybe having to kind of redesign how their networks will be laid out if they're going to go with the next generation.
Plus, these new radios are literally 6 to 8, even 10 times more expensive than the old ones. Again, there's the money issue. They're like, yeah, these are great, but I don't think they expect those kind of prices. So.
Yeah.
Does the range? Does the increase? Is there an increased range that in any way offsets?
Spectrum is spectrum. In fact, the 6 gigahertz goes a little less far than the old ones. The higher the spectrum,
it's
the less
just the consistency and strength of signal. Then
it's that, yeah.
And throughput. Yeah, you get more bits through a megahertz. It's funny how they haven't been able to change the laws of physics yet. Very frustrating.
We've been asking for that for how long now, Kurt?
Yeah. Well, I would be afraid if somebody changed the law of physics, we'd have as many downsides as upsides. So maybe we should just leave physics alone. All right, moving on. The beginning of consolidation. Oh, this is interesting. I want to hear about this.
Yeah. First off, there's a lot of venture capital in the market now looking for something to do. And they were all hoping to put a lot of money into BEAD, and I don't think they're going to be successful with BEAD. BEAD grants do not at all value new entrants. Almost universally, they're not going to want to give money to someone who's never been an ISP before. So now they got all this, and they are off. Venture capital is off building fiber in a whole lot of cities, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we're already going to start seeing the consolidation. I think you just saw Consolidated Communications moved. I think we're going to see a whole lot of players start to change hands this year, because the only way to make money with all that venture capital is to make bigger pies. They got to start putting companies together, because, the returns on infrastructure are infrastructure returns. You only get any sort of big bump when you put a whole lot of people under one umbrella. I think we're going to start seeing it. That money has to be spent somehow, and I think that's how it's going to be spent. So I can't predict who's going to come, but I think we're going to see some real interesting announcements this year. So.
Well, consolidation always scares the bejesus out of me, because that's part of the reason we have the problems we do in this country is that
absolutely.
We've had immense consolidation over the years among the big telcos, but I know it's happening because, with my boots on the ground here in Iowa, that we've had several announcements in the past 6 months of one small independent telephone cooperative buying another one or taking over management. So it is happening, and I'd rather see little guys consolidating than big guys.
I think it's going to be the big guys, and unfortunately, they're buying the high quality guys and putting them into the big corporate umbrella. It probably doesn't get better.
All right. The next prediction: cable companies will lose broadband customers. That sounds counterintuitive, sir.
This last quarter, collectively, they added 8,000 customers. All of them added together. That's pretty pitiful. They used to add 1 million a quarter. Remember those days?
Oh yeah,
So all of a sudden they're not, and the only one who actually grew was Charter. So the rest of them are already losing. The losses are going to get bigger. Every one of these competitors, fixed wireless, fiber, everybody's coming for them, and they're going to lose customers left and right, and they're panicking. The boardrooms have to be panicking because there's not much they can do about it. Their prices are way too high. They can, and so, and that's the only way they can keep Wall Street happy is to keep raising rates. So it's going to get to be really, really ugly, and it wouldn't be unusual if some of those big consolidations we talked about are in the cable industry. So.
Yeah, we have where I live, we have an REC that provides our electricity. They really put their toe in the water around establishing a local broadband concern. They decided against it because Charter's out here, and they didn't want to fight against Charter. but charter service out here is terrible. You may lose me any second. It could happen. But what I'm really intrigued
I
by,
couldn't hear you. I couldn't hear you. I'm on charter.
but what I'm really intrigued by is now Verizon is making a power play in my area with their 5G home Wi-Fi product that I'm scared to try, but is available in my area. I might do a side by side, but
do a side by side because it's 1 to
it.
300 megabits, but you have to live within 1 to 2 miles of the tower. If you're not within 2 miles of the tower, it doesn't work at all.
Well, and in addition, I literally live in a pine forest.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Doug, I've got a 5G, Verizon 5G home as a backup, which I'm going to get rid of because my new fiber provider has been rock solid. But I can sitting in the window right in my office here, and it can look right at the antennas that are on the water tower about 3 blocks away.
Then it's good.
I'm screaming. It does really well. But if I put that same hotspot on the other side of the house, forget it.
Right.
So.
Right.
All right, we're moving on to the next prediction for 2024. Little impact from FCC broadband regulation.
Well, I've been following regulators for my whole career. And of course, all the big ISPs said the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Look what you guys are doing to us. You put in all these terrible new rules about digital discrimination, and they're going to come back and put net neutrality in. We're going to be killed. Nothing's going to happen in 2024. Absolutely nothing. We had Title II before, and the FCC never went after the big guys. The fact is, they have too much market power. It takes years to turn the regulatory boat around, and so they don't want to be regulated at all,
right?
At all, period. And so now they're going to have some regulation, which means their very worst abuses will be challenged. And the FCC typically tackles the big companies by suggestion more than mandate. They're like, if you want A, you got to stop doing B. That's how they regulate them, right? So,
and then they say, "I promise we will,"
and then they do it anyway. Correct. They do it anyway. So the sky is not falling for them. At the end of the year, you're not going to find any examples of where they got hurt by this. So.
Well, not to plug a future podcast, but I will. We are actually doing a podcast interview with a gentleman from the Electronic Frontier Foundation who's going to talk about exactly why net neutrality is not going to kill everybody, and why the sky is falling attitude is counterproductive. So there's a little tease that podcast will be coming at a future edition here of Broadband.
Send me I know who that is. Send me an invitation.
I will absolutely do that. You bet. That'd be kind of fun. All right, next one.
This is the saddest one.
What's that?
The next prediction is the saddest one.
This next one?
Yeah. I think ACP is going to lapse, and not. If you go down, it's almost got universal acceptance in Congress. There's almost no one who thinks it's a bad idea, both urban and rural, right? But I don't think Congress can get their act together. They can't pass anything right now. So I think it'll lapse, and then I think before the year's out, they'll do it. But that's going to be such a major disruption. Literally, everyone will be kicked off, and we have to start all over again. So I will be very shocked if they get it done in time. It's going to run out of money by roughly April. I think these guys will still be fighting about these budget bills in April.
Yeah.
So
it's a victim of a larger partisan battle on all fronts.
Yeah. This is a minor thing that. There's a whole lot of other things they all agree on that aren't going to get done too. That's the shame of what's going on. So that's just my take.
It helps so many people, but no campaign contributors.
Yeah.
So
when it does come back, it's going to come back as a different thing. It's not going to cover incomes up to 200% of poverty. They're going to pare it back.
You think it'll go into more parameters like the Lifeline program then?
Yeah, they're gonna pare it back to be smaller. Be my guess. They're going to go, look, I'll give it to you, but not $6 billion a year. It'll be $3 billion a year.
And
something like that, yeah.
And Biden proposed, which goes nowhere, of course, another $6 billion, but that's just a stopgap to maybe get through the end of the year. So, is there any permanent funding pathway that we can see here in the future?
Because this has to be done by Congress now. It's never permanent. Every year it's up for challenge. That's sad.
Yeah, I just saw Gigi Sohn speak recently at a conference, and she gave the keynote. And there was a great question and answer back and forth at the end. And then right as she was walking off stage, she mic dropped just out of the blue. And if you think there will ever be a permanent funding source for the ACP, you are wrong. It will never happen. And then she just walked off stage.
And I agree with her.
Golly, you guys, I'm going to have another cup of coffee to lift my spirits after this. I'm just, oh, geez, I'm going back to bed. We will move on to hopefully better, more cheerful predictions for 2024. The FCC will launch the 5G fund. I am intrigued by that, Doug, and I don't know exactly what you're talking about, so tell us.
It's a $9 billion fund to build rural cell towers.
Oh,
badly need it, and they need to, they need to use subsidy money to do that because these things don't make money. But let's get them built, right? And so they've been trying to do that for 4 years now. It's finally going to get launched next year. It's not nearly enough money. We need almost 80 or 100 billion to get them where they are needed. But that's a nice start.
Yeah.
So that's going to build a whole lot of cell towers. Once the word is out that that's going to happen, all the counties with bad cellular coverage, which is essentially every county, is going to be trying to make sure that they're part of that. So it's going to be a mad scramble, I think. So
if you had to guess, when would you guess that it'll be announced and we'll start ramping?
Oh, I think it'll be announced by summer. It'll be a reverse auction. The reverse auction may not finish in the year, but I think by summer they'll announce that it's a go. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I can tell you we have determined that, well, we knew it was a problem, but just boots on the ground with our digital navigator in far southern rural Iowa. And she's having a very hard time just helping people find an internet connection because the wired networks are not there in the highly rural areas. And neither is anything better than low bandwidth 4G. So it's a struggle to get those people online, even though we have programs in place that can enable them to do that for little or no cost.
And most of the country,
go ahead.
Most of the country, the cellular coverage is even worse than the broadband coverage. I mean,
true. That's still an issue in a lot of areas.
Yeah. So one of the things we've had to do to get coverage for our digital navigators clients is we've had to partner with multiple cell companies for hotspots, so that we can at least
find even one that works, right? Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
We're working with 4 different hotspots right now, 4 different models, and we had 4 physical hotspots, and we're with a client that we want to give one to in their area. We test them all out and we allocate the best one. But and that's just so stopgap and on an individual level. But it's like, if you can't get it at your house, at least you can take your kids to your friends instead of sitting in the McDonald's parking lot, right?
Yeah. Right. And we complain a lot about the national broadband maps, but boy, the wireless cellular maps are a hot mess as well.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I'm sure it's.
I don't know. T-Mobile claims that they have broadband in my house. You know the speed they claim? 0.2 megabits. It's like, why did you bother to put that into the map? It's somebody there. It's like, that was a very interesting decision. You could have just not put it in.
So it's a nationwide problem, and hopefully the 5G fund will at least address it in the areas that have the highest need.
It's certainly a good first step. I think. I mean, I laud it. I hope it's very successful. So.
And finally, you even tagged it the least bold prediction I've ever made. Big ISPs will continue to buy back stocks rather than invest in networks or maintenance. I am shocked.
I mean, T-Mobile alone, I think, bought back $9 billion of their stock last year, instead of investing that in networks. So I think collectively there's probably more money in stock buybacks in the industry last year than there was investment by those big companies. They cry and they complain that they can't afford to make these new investments, and of course they can. They just have to stop this nonsense. So, so they're doing it for the benefit of the stockholders and for the management who run these companies more than they don't care about their customers. We have to be honest about that. So.
And that's not just happening in telecommunications.
Oh either. No, this is across all the big corporations.
Yeah, this is
insane how much there is. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that it's something that our policymakers just completely ignore when it comes to we've got taxpayer dollars are being committed to build networks, and some of those monies are going to people who have not been investing and won't invest unless they get those free dollars. And we're just ignoring the fact that the reason they don't have dollars to do it on their own is because of all of this backyard or backdoor shenanigans they're doing to pad their corporate pocketbooks.
The only reason we even have a BEAD grant is because they failed to invest. I mean, there you go. It's that simple. They could have made broadband work in the rural areas.
That's true. That's true.
Well, we are a democracy in service to our capitalists.
Well, your house
We're
is even more of a democracy because you're being outvoted by cats. So.
And a dog, and one dog who's the same size as my cats. So you probably thought it was 3 cats.
There you go.
The cats are playing the long game. Eventually, they're going to take over. We all know this is true.
We all know this. Yes.
Yeah. So, not to put you on the spot, Doug, but while we got you here, let's think about last year and your predictions. Were there any that you thought you did really well, and some that you completely blew?
I have to admit, I haven't gone back and read them. Ask me later. I'm sure I did blow a few. I usually go, but that's the first year I didn't do that. I should have. So.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm usually about 80% right. So yeah.
Nice.
Well, let's all hope that the one that I'm wrong on is the ACP. But yeah.
Which one of the ones from this year do you think you might most likely be wrong on?
The ACP. There's always a slight chance the Congress will get their act together. That when I say it out loud, I go, no, it's not true.
You don't jinx us.
Yeah. It's possible that we won't see big consolidations this year. If not, they'll hit the following year. They're coming. I mean, there's going to be monstrous big consolidation coming. So, the rest of them, I feel pretty good about.
Well, if anybody is listening, or if they're watching this on YouTube, you can go back and find last year's podcast and listen to it and see what he said, because I believe that you are almost always very accurate, and that's why we like to do this with you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's good being here today.
So as far as 2024 for you goes, CCG Consulting, give you a little plug there. You're going to be a busy boy, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's just so much going on. I mean, everybody wants to talk broadband. So
yeah.
Yep, not a bad time to be in the business.
Yeah, well, we'll do what we can until we don't have anything to do anymore, right?
Well, if everybody gets fiber.
I was thinking about that this morning, though. The work that CBAN's been doing, and Doug, that you were doing before all of this came around, we can still do that when the money's gone. It will basically go back to being the same as it was.
Yeah.
BEAD is not going to solve everything. BEAD's not going to come close to solving everything. On top of that, it leaves out, I counted 3,600 towns of under 20,000 people who also have low income, who are not being solved by this. I mean, there's a whole lot of work yet to be done.
I'm going to be talking to a city council tonight in one of those towns, and they'll never get $1 of subsidy. So they're going to have to figure out some other way to get better broadband.
We still have a whole lot of broadband to fix.
Yep, we sure do. Well, we'll keep doing the work. Everybody grab your shovel and we'll keep at it. Doug, thank you very much. Doug Dawson has been our guest today on our latest edition of Broadband Action. Thanks again, Doug. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And we'll see y'all next time.